Hi there everybody, this video is a bit different than the usual output. That's because I've got my screen on a screen record rather than going through clip by clip. It's be easier just to lay this out, so I'm going to try and do it in one big go. Let me know if this format works down below. Now, as you can probably see, I'm going to be speaking about this mass rape trial in France. It's absolutely appalling. I'm sure you've seen it in the news. It involves a poor woman called Gisèle Pelicot. Her husband is a huge sex creep unbeknownst to her, and for years he was drugging her, making her comatose, and inviting men over to essentially mass rape her. As I say, it's appalling situation, and he has been found guilty and thrown in jail for a couple of decades, as I understand. But why I wanted to explore this was because the BBC, as usual, the representative of globalist, liberal, correct, centre-left thought, has decided to write a piece on this, an opinion piece on it. And why it caught my eye was, as you can see in the title, they're equating this French rape trial to male desire. Now, this is something that we see a lot from the leftist media. They will tell us how evil we are for saying something like, let's say a Muslim fanatic drives a truck into people at Christmas or goes chopping heads in London Bridge. And if someone says, could this be a problem with Islam? There will be a massive outcry. You know, how dare you? You should never judge the group by the actions of the individual. And fair enough. That is typical of liberalism, by the way. It's always about the individual, never broader trends. But in principle, you shouldn't blame all Muslims for the actions of a few, fine. But when it's the other way around, and let's just say a group they don't tend to like, they view as a power structure, that is men on the whole, they're more than happy to equate male desire with an absolutely appalling crime. And you can see that in the title. The France rape trial throws up difficult questions about porn fantasies and male desire. Now, I'd probably agree regarding the porn fantasies, as we'll see. But why are you including the whole of the male grouping when you're exploring this? Well, the first thing to understand is this is written by somebody who seems like a leftist. I don't think she's a psychologist herself, and they normally are leftists, but she seems to be involved in therapist matching platforms and an editor of a psychology magazine. In essence, what that means is she's probably been inculcated into a leftist worldview, i.e. the male sexual drive is a form of power, and so on and so on. Now, I'm going to fire through this quite quickly because a lot of it's just explaining the situation at the beginning, which I'm sure you all know at this point. It is appalling. As you can see there, 50 men have been in court, which goes to show the level of depravity that we've witnessed here. And she goes to speak about how the internet changed the norm. And I think that's a fair point. The internet has become quite an unhealthy arena for sexual expression, if we could call it that. There's lots of information these days about what you could call tolerance, i.e. what was once quite shocking 20 years ago is now normalised. You could say, a naked woman would be an example. I remember there's an old Chris Rock joke about how a naked woman was an event 20 years ago. You'd be like, wow. Now, not so much in modernity. It's just everywhere, so it doesn't shock us anymore. And instead, people will seek out harder material to satisfy them, to get that level of shock or a dopamine hit. It's almost like a drug in a way, what's really happening. So again, in principle, I'd agree that is a problem. I don't know if we could use that as a justification for what's happened to this poor woman, but still, I think it probably is a problem. She also does go on to speak about Lily Collins, her name? The girl who slept with 100 men recently. And again, it is a symbol that of what's happened to the West, of how we've fallen apart. And you could say that, as I said in a video that I did about that, the real problem with something like that is that it normalises other extreme acts that no longer seem extreme. So, for instance, if a woman sleeps with 100 men in her 20s, well, that's normal. That girl did it in a day. Of course, sleeping with 100 men in your 20s is not normal, nor healthy, nor good for society. But now that's completely ignored because we're all looking at this Lily girl who's obviously destroyed her soul. However, again, as you might imagine, she does somewhere in this link the story about the girl who slept with 100 men in a day to, again, men in general. But where I really want to get to is these sorts of statements here. Not all men, but always a man. Again, there's an implication here. There's a fundamental problem in masculinity. And most of her is just going on about generic stuff here. But here we go. She really gets into it here, and she says, questions around desire. A key and problematic aspect of the whole question of fantasy is desire. In the post-Freudian age, it's become a truism that desires should not be repressed, and much of the liberation theory of the 1960s emphasized self-actualization through the realization of sexual desire. Exactly. It's like she's having a wake-up moment here. This is where this mess is coming from. This madness wasn't happening in traditional conservative desires, where there would be a high price for females acting like Lily Collins, and for disgusting men who've done what they've done to this poor French woman, there would be severe repercussions, perhaps even death. However, the 1960s said we should welcome all forms of desires. Again, we've explored that before. A lot of that comes from the Frankfurt School, as well as other influences, which stated that it's a Western mold of oppression to state that, we should have sexual norms in society, that we should have sexual standards, and we need to break free of them all. Well, now we're starting to experience the absolute disaster that that's caused, and we really are just at the tip of the iceberg. It really is going to get a lot worse, and we can see that happening year by year. She continues, male desire has become an increasingly contested concept, not least because of the questions of power and domination often entangled with it. Now, again, this is so interesting because this is where you know that she's been indoctrinated with leftist language, leftist ideology. When she says power and domination, what she means is women like men who have some sense of forthrightness, confidence, ability in the world. In essence, a woman has to be able to look up to a man in some sense in order to respect him. If she can't do that, she won't date him. Men have to learn that lesson the hard way. I know I did. I believed in all this feminist equality crap. And I acted like the nice, equal dude, you take the lead, be a strong woman, and you just get rejected. I'm sorry, that's a harsh truth that I had to learn, and millions of men had to learn in their 20s. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to turn into some dominant bully. This is what they imply. What it means is you have to gain aptitude, confidence, coolness, non-neediness, all of those qualities that women tend to like, and they'll then start to actually respect you, and then you can build a relationship. Of course, through a leftist lens, that is just power. That attraction that women have has been implemented by evil power structures of Western masculine patriarchy. That's a complete myth. Women naturally want men they can respect, but the leftist twisting of that, disgusting twisting really, turns that natural relationship into something of power and domination. It's through a Marxist frame, if you like. And this is how we have to remember this article. And much of modern society sees men and the relations between men and women, and then they wonder why things are in such a mess. Now, anyway, as we go on, she states there is a dark borderline where a very basic form of heterosexual male desire, or the primal urge to have sex with women or many women, can grow into a shared endeavour, creating an esprit de corps of boundary pushing that may pay little heed or care for female experience. Now, again, what's your reference point for this? You've got two extreme cases in this appalling case in France and this Lily Collins woman. But if you actually look at how these are received online, like I'm sure you've all seen the videos about the Lily girl and this, it is full of men calling these other men absolutely appalling and disgusting, because still the majority of men, despite the feminist brainwashing, have held on to standards. They've held on to their tradition. They still listen to the resonance in their heart and view such men as scumbags. Because we all know the men that are doing this are not good men. They're not going to be high status men. They're not going to be men who've worked on themselves. They're not moral men. These are the men we look down upon and would have punished severely historically. However, again, in this article, she aligns that behaviour of certain disgusting men with heterosexual male desire. And this is, again, the fundamental problem of the West. It's more than happy to completely blame the whole of men and masculine desire for these actions of really what are a small subsection of appalling men. Again, here's the OnlyFans performer. She is called Lily Phillips, drawing a huge queue of participants to have sex with her, where she in a mission to have sex with 100 men in a day. Now, again, who are these men that are going there? These aren't good men. These are the lowest of the low, which makes it all the more disgusting. And of course, in her eyes, she can't make any distinction between such men, because I suppose to her that wouldn't be liberal. The tendency to objectify women may in some cases also develop into a desire to annihilate the whole question of female desire, let alone agency. Well, again, this is just feminist language. And it's interesting as well how the liberalisation of sex has led to this. It's not, if you like, the masculine desire in its fullness, because that would have led to more of a traditional understanding. That was our history when we actually had patriarchy. Obviously, male desire takes many forms, she continues, most of it an entirely healthy nature, but it's traditionally been constrained by cultural limits. Correct, exactly. Now those limits have shifted radically in the UK and elsewhere in the West. Again, exactly, you're finally getting it. And the underlying conviction that the realization of desire is an act of self-liberation amounts to a potent and sometimes troubling combination. Again, really good. She's starting to grasp what's gone on here. The liberal structure, the post-Marxian structure, whatever we want to call it, has come in and undermined the sexual standards that maintained the West. That's the core problem here. But as soon as she has that moment of realization, it's like she's frightened of becoming too right-wing, becoming too traditionalist. And she has to blame Andrew Tate. Now, I'm no fan of Andrew Tate. I've said I have some ambivalence towards him. In one sense, I can respect him giving young men a reason to live, a drive to actually go and achieve something in the world, to wake them up to some of the inequalities they face and some of the, you could say, feminist culture that really does one over on men. Of course, on the flip side, I don't like the whole thing about cars and money. It's not really my cup of tea at all. I don't think that serves us as a people. I believe the true masculine role is duty to the broader collective and to God. However, he seems to put a lot more focus on materialism. In many ways, Tate is a creation of liberalism, sort of Nietzschean liberalism in a sense. Anyway, André de Tricoteau, sorry for butchering that name, any French speakers out there, a therapist based in South Kensington, London. Apparently there are lots of French in South Kensington, I only learned that the other day. But anyway, brought the appeal of masculinist influences such as Andrew Tate, a self-proclaimed misogynist with 10.4 million followers. Tricoteau says that he has encountered men feeling demeaned and displaced by the rise of feminism. Well, that's because they have been demeaned and displaced by the rise of feminism. They're not feeling that way. They've been told that they have no relevance a lot of the time. They've also been told to be an ally to women, but when they do that, they get rejected by the very women they're supposed to be supporting. And they have to watch often feminist women go and sleep with the Andrew Tates of the world while they're being told they're disgusting. Now, that might be anecdotal, but that's my experience of London. It's brutal out there. Not every woman is like that, but many women will pursue guys like Andrew Tate because they're rich, they've got power, they're confident, and deep down they sexually crave that masculine energy. Now, of course, Andrew Tate isn't going to appeal to all women, I get that, but that is something that's a harsh reality. So it's not that men have been demeaned and displaced by the rise of feminism, feel they have. It's that that's actually happened. There are men that have just been left on the scrap heap. Some men don't know who to be. That's true. Men are socialized to be dominant. No, they're not. It's the opposite of that is happening today. They are not socialized to be dominant. They're socialized to be passive in this day and age. That's what's really going on. But of course, this is another leftist who believes ideologically rather than practically. He's not looking at what's really happening. He's looking to his theory and his post-Marxian literature to explain what masculinity is and viewing the natural, you could say, masculine drive to go out in the world and succeed, to have something that a woman can look up to and respect. He's viewing that through that Marxian frame again. So it's not socialization, that's just nature. But of course he turns it into a power dynamic. But they're also expected to be in touch with their emotions, able to show vulnerability. What he means by that is they're expected to be like women. And that's what's happened to lots of young men. They're told, don't be like Andrew Tate. Don't ever try and be better than a woman. Don't ever try and impress a woman. Don't ever try and show leadership qualities. That makes you disgusting and toxic and evil. What you need to be is soft and gentle, more like the women. Be emotional and weak. Now, again, I'm not saying there that men shouldn't have space where they can bare their souls. I think maybe they need that at certain times in their life. But I've always believed that's best done in male tribes. With male elders who know what they're talking about, who can guide men through difficult periods of life, with peers who are going through other hardships, whether that's hardships with work, with women, with personal and spiritual troubles. I think they're best off dealt with other men, not with women. Women give female advice, which tends to damage men. And this is what's happened again. This guy's trying to express what the problem is. He's trying to diagnose the problem. But while he's doing that, he is showing how he creates the problem. He doesn't understand the nature of men and the nature of men and women. And he also doesn't understand how the solution that leftists are giving is weakening men. And then they blame Andrew Tate. As he states, this confusion can lead to anger. Well, it can, but not for the reasons you think it does, directed to the feminist movement. Well, that's true, but sometimes that anger is justified. Now, I'm not pro yelling at anybody. I'm not pro this effing and blinding online. I don't think it helps many people. And I can admit there is a big problem with the red pill and the black pill. Some people call it red pill rage. Lots of men just getting angry at women. That's not the way. You've got to find peace in your own heart and soul first before you can deal with any of this. If you don't, you'll just get eaten alive by it. And then you become the cliche of the guy who watches Andrew Tate and is all angry. And unfortunately, then you lose the vital wisdom that's out there to learn, and you just end up being eaten alive by leftism. Anyway, with a 60% male client base, Tricoteau observes that men can be socialised to view power and dominance as part of their identity. Again, this is like Foucault, in terms of the way that he's understanding this. It's not that men are socialised to view power and dominance as part of their identity. That's part of life. Now, I wouldn't use the words power and dominance. I would say, look, if you have a rich man, he's going to get a woman, an attractive woman, no matter how old he is. We've all seen these weird cases of, say, an 80-year-old man who marries a Playboy bunny who's 24-year-old girl called, Crystal Taylor or whatever. And, he dies in 5 years and she takes all his money. Why is she marrying him? Well, yeah, it's the money. The money is a representative of a form of power in the world that the woman likes. Now, money aren't the only forms of power, but it's probably the major one in this day and age. Other forms of power might include intelligence, humour, wit, social status. Prince Harry and Meghan, for instance. I don't think Meghan would turn a blind eye at someone like Harry if he was a marketing manager on 35 to 40k down in London. But of course, because he's in a royal family, a famous royal dynasty, he will turn her eye. Now, of course, this has been the same throughout time, but this guy's trying to turn this into some sort of plot, if you like, that's happened amongst the dominance hierarchy of the West. Men have to find an aptitude in a certain arena, is what I'm saying. If you don't, it will be very hard to find a mate. And that aptitude can be any walk of life. It can be menial work, it can be being a labourer, whatever. But you have to be able to do something well in order to get a mate. Now, this is not to justify anything like the Pelicot case. Now, whenever people say this is not to justify, what they mean is this is to justify. It's when someone says, with all due respect, and then says a criticism of you. You get that in football commentary a lot. A Manchester United player like Gary Neville will say, with all due respect, Birmingham aren't a very good team. But what he means is Birmingham aren't a very good team. With all due respect is meaningless. So when he's saying this is not to justify, what he's saying is the dominance hierarchy, or alleged one, that, if you like, empowers the supposed male power over women that feminists fight against, has caused what's happened in the Pelicot case. He continues, but objectively, I can see that such behaviour is an escape from powerlessness and inadequacy. It's tantalising and forbidden. Again, what he's saying here is the only way these men act like this, or the only reason men act like this, is because they're powerless and inadequate. Now, there may be smidgens of truth to that, but he's ignoring here that these are disgusting men. That phenomenon does exist. And why he's putting it this way is to, if you like, justify his leftist worldview. This case is disturbing because it shows the extremes that people will go to. Well, it's not really saying anything. He also pointed out online groups such as the one that Mr. Pelicot used can be very powerful. Your ideas are validated. Again, this is a subsection of creepy men that in the past would have been taken care of by our tradition. They would have been held in line firmly, and they would see how we treat other men who behave in this way, which would have created social order. Further to that, we would have had better social order because we wouldn't promote this liberalised understanding of sex. That means men should sleep with as many women as they can, and women should be open to doing whatever they want as long as it's consensual, even if it's harming them beyond belief, like the Lily Collins woman. This is why sometimes the wisdom of the society is much stronger than the supposed wisdom of the individuals. But the point I'm trying to make in this is all men keep getting blamed, and they try and write these puff pieces as if it's going to solve anything, as if we can just understand feminism that bit better. Of course, what they're actually doing is making this situation 10 times worse. Until we go back to a stable sense of tradition between men and women, we won't solve these things. These sorts of cases are going to come up again and again. There'll be more Andrew Tates and there will be more Lily Collins. These are just my views as always. Let me know what you think down below. Do consider subscribing to the channel if you're new.